Hello, everybody, and welcome to Facebook Live with the CEO. My name is Ronaldo Hardy, CEO here at Southwest Louisiana Credit Union, and it is always a pleasure to come and have conversations with you. We've been doing this for a while now. Actually, it's award-winning at this point. We started it just to encourage top-level, top-down transparency. I'll always want to make sure that I'm available to you for all of your questions, needs, or concerns. And so we started it just so you and I can have conversation with each other, get to know one another, and continue this growth and learning experience. And we've actually won an award for it. So I thought that was pretty cool to share with you. You can't see this, but I actually have my candle burning today. So while we're not talking about, they might be getting it in the shot, while we might not be talking about tennis shoes today, because you know I love showing off my shoes for the day. The shoes today are just kind of ordinary, but you know, I do have my candle burning. It just helps to create a cool environment here for me. It's good smells really make a difference, and that's a really great segue into what we're talking about today: how we can make a difference in utilizing our voice to address legislative concerns. And so I know many times we have no idea what's going on at the state capitol or the U.S. Capitol, but there are bills that are being brought into in front of legislators on an ongoing basis that impact you and I. And recently, about 2 weeks ago, I had an opportunity to go into the state capitol to speak up on a particular bill that was going to affect consumers adversely. In fact, there was a bill that was going to expand payday lending in the state of Louisiana. And it was going to be harmful in nature due to the fact that the interest rates on those particular loans were going to be as high as 167%. Now you think about that. I mean, would you really want to be in a scenario where you were paying on a loan at an interest rate of 167%? And a lot of times when you're in that tight situation, you're not thinking about how much it's going to cost you on the back end when you go and take advantage of that short-term solution. But we wanted to make sure that we avoided that type of experience for consumers and found a way to redirect consumers to products that would be in their best interest. There's some things happening with the CFPB that's actually going to curtail payday lending as we have known it thus far, and it's going to be in the best interest of consumers. And so even though you might not have known that this bill was coming up, I had a friend, a state representative, who contacted me and said, Ronaldo, this bill is coming in front of the Commerce Committee, the House Commerce Committee on tomorrow. Will you come and testify on this bill? And the argument that was being made in particular was that there were not products in the market that would address that particular segment of consumers in our state. And so there was an appeal being made to make sure that there was something to help those who were in need. And I was just so glad to be there to raise my hand and to speak up and say there are in fact products in the market that do address that need, and they are a much better solution and less costly solution for consumers. And ultimately, because of that testimony that was offered, and it got a little testy, you know, and it's okay, but things get a little testy sometimes when you're speaking up. But because of that testimony in particular, we were able to stop that bill from making it out of the the House Commerce Committee. And so it's a win for consumers. And as your credit union president and CEO, I consider it my role and responsibility, our role as an organization, to make sure we're speaking up for you. But I certainly don't mind going to the Capitol, rolling up my sleeves, and getting the job done if it's going to make the best impact on you and others around our state. So with that said, I want to encourage you because a lot of times we think that, our voice isn't going to be heard. It's not going to matter if I speak up. Nobody's going to care. What if I did not take the time that day to go there to have that conversation? This bill could have gone through and could have caused damage to consumers, many consumers around the state. So don't discount the power of your voice. You really can make a difference. And I know it's frustrating because politics are not something that any of us get excited about, including myself. But if we're not speaking up, we're not going to be able to make the difference that we want to see. And with that said, I want to open the floor for questions if we have any.
All right. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get more involved in his or her community but doesn't know where to start?
That's a good question. I think that the first thing for you to identify are organizations that you may already be involved with that could be making that difference. So what's going on in your church? Is your church connected with the community? Find out what's happening in the city. There's a Chamber of Commerce in every city. Generally they put on events that do connect with legislators. The city itself has council meetings, things of that nature, making sure that you're showing up in the places and spaces where these dialogues are occurring. Watch the local news. And I know that's not always exciting, right? Because the news can certainly put a spin on a story, but at the end of the day, at least being informed, whether it's an opinion or not, being informed of a matter can direct you to the place that you may need to go in order to speak up and be heard. What you shouldn't do is just sit at home and do nothing. Especially because we can all be tempted in our social media platforms to utilize that place and space to complain rather than trying to find the solution that's going to make the difference. And I'm guilty of it at times where I get frustrated and I come to that platform and I speak my mind, but I'm also going to make sure that those who have the power to change things hear my voice as well.
What does the credit union do to help empower people financially and make a difference in their lives?
That's a good question. So our organization focuses specifically on financial empowerment for all, and we're doing a number of different things to make that happen. Number one, we are almost at the end of the process of certifying 100% of our staff as certified financial counselors so that we can make sure that we are present in those conversations with you to build up your financial empowerment, also offering education to you as well so that you have the knowledge of the decisions that you need to make ongoing. And then, of course, we are constantly plugged in to issues that are happening legislatively to make sure that we are positioning our voice as well in that discussion. So whether you step up or not, do know that we're going to make sure that someone's there speaking on your behalf, but it is so much more exciting and more powerful when you are engaged and helping us in that process.
And what advice would you give to others who have trouble speaking up, public speaking, things that you are used to in your job? How do they get better at that?
I think that you get better by just trying. Like you have to actually start the process of speaking in order to improve. You never know how good you're going to become at something until you first do it. I remember when I first started doing these types of things and going into these places and spaces, it was intimidating. Prior to being in this career, I did not do as much interaction with legislators outside of relationships and friendships I had. But by getting in those places and spaces and speaking up, I got better at it. And you got to know, it doesn't really matter how refined you are. It's really what you have to say. And so sometimes we discount our ability to be effective because we're waiting to be refined instead of just speaking up, using whatever gift that we have, no matter how it's packaged. You may say, well, I'm a little timid, or maybe I stutter, or maybe, I get scared and I start sweating like crazy or whatever. People are people. And at the end of the day, you're talking to another human being. And so just calm down and say what you have to say. And if you keep on doing this routinely, you will get better at it. You'll get to the point where, even if you get a little bit nervous, that won't be enough to overcome your passion to see the change take place. That's it.
There's a question from a viewer who's
Okay.
asking, how is it possible to charge more than 100% interest? Is that even legal? Who regulates payday lenders?
That is at this point, or it has been legal. As a matter of fact, in some scenarios, payday lenders were charging up to 400% on payday loans. And so what the CFPB did do is that they stepped in and said, look, we need to do something to curtail this. And so they've actually enacted some policy changes that's going to significantly reduce the products that payday lenders can offer. As a matter of fact, they're scrambling right now to figure out how their industry is going to continue to survive, because as of August of 2019, a lot of the way in which they have been functioning will be obsolete. And so this new bill that was being positioned was to get in and kind of help to give them a new way to operate as an industry. And they were selling it off. Look, I thought this was very interesting. They were selling it off as, it's no longer 400%. Now it's 167. And it was really being positioned as a monthly fee of 9% of the loan. But when you amortize it over 12 months, then it's 167%, right? And so what they were doing was seeking to enact that through legislation so that they could do what they need to do. As a credit union, I can tell you that we don't have that same luxury. Through the NCUA says the maximum that can be charged on a payday type of loan is 28%. So if you just consider the maximum, and let me just give you an apples to apples comparison. $500 loan, 12-month term, under the new payday lending bill that was being proposed would have cost consumers $270. So can you imagine paying back $270 above the $500 that you had borrowed? Crazy, right? Same type of loan at the maximum rate on the credit union side, 28%. The maximum rate, most credit unions come below that, but even at the max, $79 versus $270. That's a huge difference. And so that's what we went to the state capitol to make sure that they knew, is that products were already available for consumers. And not only were they available, they were much better and way less expensive. Good question. With that said, thank you so much for joining us for Facebook Live with the CEO. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. I'll try to bring a few pairs of my shoes because, look, I've been going crazy buying shoes lately. So I'll try to bring some next time we have this conversation. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to connecting with you again next month.